Another DraftScience video presentation. Um, okay, so I guess I'll no comments. So I guess I will do some other things. Yeah. So just a reminder, I am offering a YouTube channel with more than 100,000 subscribers. That gets something more than whatever 20,000 average views a video. $2,000. It says 1,700, but it's really 2,000 if they ask for two. Anyway, just to play one of my videos on their channel, because there really needs to be this conversation. There needs to be exposure. It is kind of disappointing that there is so little energy, among physics people to really engage people in any kind of constructive way. All the people, all the dissidents. You have to be the most outrageous. That is, you have to say something that's just outrageously wrong. Like the flat Earth theory, for them to even, to man up and go to battle, which just demonstrates that they are fundamentally, cowards. Really. You sort of saw this with atheists too. Some of them, they'd pick the lowest fruit. It's that whole thing. They wouldn't go after the reasonably religious. They would just attack the fanatical, craziest of the bunch, and usually make fun of some sort of hypocrisy in their personal life or some other kind of bullshit. They didn't even get onto the subject of their actual faith, which clearly didn't exist in many cases. But anyway. So that's really what it's about. It's about arguing people who aren't really doing science. They're just doing, some sort of shenanigans, playing some sort of game, which is what the flat earthers are doing, kind of obviously. They don't really believe it. They're just playing some social game. Anyway, and it's just all very disappointing that you can't even pay these people to grow a pair of balls. Or even, just try a pair on. But anyway, conspiracy cats, for example. Anyway, just runs away, says he will do it and then obviously runs away. As I've said before, I can negotiate with anyone. So even if you don't have a very good channel, if you just you're a physicist or something about physics and are willing to attempt to defend in a live conversation the physics you believe in, your religion, and that's what I have to call it, really. I'm willing to pay you for your time. So all I can do is I can just reason and make offers and try to, be fair. And, if there just aren't any willing humans, that have any integrity or, give a shit about the truth, there just isn't. Sadly. That is a learning experience for me. Like I said, I've never liked humans much and thought they were mostly shit. But I didn't think they were so much mostly shit. I really did think they had some kind of, underneath it all, that they had a brain that wanted to know the truth and all that kind of stuff, that they all weren't just religious kooks. And it just turns out that's really all you are, whatever your little mother and teachers and your little favorite dog told you, those are the only stories you can believe, and you're just stuck with them for life, apparently. You have no capacity to accept, you've been duped, and that maybe you have to, restructure the meaning of your life, and it's, because there's a truth that you missed. Alright, so I don't know if I need to babble on any more about that. So we'll just start talking some physics and, maybe if it stays slow here, I'll do another Feynman video. Because you can just do it, you play it over and over again. You can just pick apart every single sentence, the whole attitude, the whole approach. You can just see how they have all this confidence, and it really is just all a house of cards. It's a house of religion. Little trite, silly stories that can't possibly be true, and and they've structured it into a whole, like it does have an agenda, and so anyway, so moving on. So what, this, I like that. Okay, for after through doing these videos, I like that I came up with this analogy for gravity with the idea of rain, and you can think of the force, and the way it's collected, and it's just basically mass just gives you a collector, a bucket, and depending on what your mass is will decide how much of the steady rain can get in your bucket per any moment of time. So you can sort of think of it in another way. You could think of it as when you're falling with the force, it's sort of painting onto your mass. So the bigger your mass, the more paint you collect. And the paint exaggerates the meaning of your mass, and so it just gives you more weight, and so your weight just keeps increasing because you have a surface that can collect the paint. And then when you're going against gravity, you can think of the gravity as sand, and it's tearing the paint off, and so the more exposure you have to the sand, the more paint's getting torn off. And that's a good way of understanding why this one travels with the same energy. This one travels 4 times the distance that this one will travel. Why, to get to the the same velocity. I don't want to say it the wrong way. Well, it's at least 2 times, 4 times if you're doubling the velocity. So anyway. Where's my proper eraser? Ugh. So that works as an explanation. It's a way of understanding. So gravity is sort of a unique case in the sense that it applies the force proportional to your exposure. Now magnetism does the same thing, but the trick is with magnets, because it's this smaller force, you can create a constant repulsion by just having 2 magnets of a consistent size, that are repelling each other, and pushing them into each other. You'll always create the same amount of pressure between them at a certain distance. So you can use this mechanism essentially to duplicate a spring, and it has the advantage of being kind of more like a nuclear spring, it's even less capable of heating up or doing some other kind of crap. So it's, a really good spring. But if I did change the size of this magnet, then I'd end up back in the gravity problem. In the smaller the magnet, the less force, hits it. So, it becomes an uneven spring. Alright. So that's another good thing to know. So I was thinking about the transfer part, and I think I've pretty much demonstrated, the simple cart examples where the same spring tension, and you have 2 carts of equal mass, and just one mass, and they leave at exactly the same speed in the 2 directions with the same amount of momentum, and that if I make the cart heavier, or twice as big, twice as heavy, 2 times mass, and the same exact compression, that I'll get the same momentum. That is, the mass and velocity will give me the right answer, the same answers I'll get for here. But the velocity will be 1/2 the velocity because I have twice as much mass. But the idea is that the energy is always consistent. That what's going one way doesn't have anything to do with the other way. It doesn't matter what I put on one side. The other side's always going to do its thing. It's always going to be just 100 momentum, so to speak, this way, and 100 momentums this way. And it just doesn't matter which one's got wheels and which one doesn't. And there's a lot of ways to think about that. But one of the ways... So anyway, just saying that this, the 1/2 mv squared formula just completely fails here because it has this silly proposition that half the energy is destroyed in this case, when a rational person knows that if I bang the 2x cart going half the speed in a 1 mass cart going twice as fast, that they will compress a third spring, exactly the same amount. That they have the same momentum. They're conceding they have the same momentum. So they're conceding they're going to compress it the same amount. And so if it's the same amount, it means I could just replace, I can compress the spring, replace this cart, put the one mass unit there back again, and all of a sudden I get back all that energy I lost. I lost 1/2 the energy here, and yet somehow I'll get it back over here. How does this spring know to give it back? That doesn't make any sense. So of course I never lost the energy. It's just silly. And the numbers prove it, right? I mean, I already showed that part, but you'll get, a number like 152, and the other one was like 72, and it's like, okay, this is a little bit slower. So that means when this one left, it's a little bit less than half the velocity, because I did lose a little tiny bit to the extra mass. But it's just a tiny bit, not half the energy. So, I mean, the formula's dead in the water. It doesn't predict reality. It's false, fake, phony. Here it's been sitting in their physics for 300 years and has this obvious flaw. I mean, it's not like it's a little flaw, like it's an obscure flaw. You can't see the flaw. They never had any good evidence for this stupid theory. Never. There was never any good experimental evidence. And for this to exist, to have survived the modern age and modern scrutiny, all of these physicists, but you can see why. Because when you go out and look and say, show me these experiments being done, they all do it exactly the same way. It's almost like the Bible tells them exactly what experiments they're allowed to do, and never do the forbidden experiments. Don't touch certain parts of physics because that's a sin. I mean, it's just has all the features of a religion, in the sense that no one was ever curious enough to say, well, gee, it lost half its energy. Maybe I'll bang it into another spring and see how much energy it actually has. Because losing half its energy, why didn't this one lose half its energy? It doesn't make any sense. When everything loses half its energy every time something happens, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's so bad. The lack of curiosity that must exist, the lack of any kind of skepticism. They just buy all of this stuff. They are so, I guess, so humiliated, by the fact that they don't understand, and they can't. Oh, I must not understand because I'm flawed or something. I must be a jerk because I can't quite understand what they're saying. And so they must be so defensive about that lack of ability to understand all the other crap that they just assume it all must be true because, well, it's true. I mean, I'm paying money to learn this stuff. It must be the right stuff. Why would I pay 30 grand a year to learn a bunch of shit? That would be crazy. Anyway. So, I don't know if somebody wishes to do this simple experiment, has the tools, the space, and all that stuff. I might have magnets. I might have some ability to do some version of it. I have a decent enough camera to maybe take a time-lapse picture. Maybe if I have to do it. I think everybody can already know it intuitively. I mean, any physicist knows this didn't lose half its energy. They know that twice the mass and half the velocity object still has the same energy as the one mass, twice the velocity object. They know that because they know the momentums match. So they know it didn't lose half its energy. I mean, I shouldn't even have to say it. They already know the right answer. And so why can't they just say, well, that can't be right? It can't be right. It's impossible for this to be correct because it is not predicting the right answers. And they're way off. It's not like it's a little bit off. It's way off. And again, remember, it started with just MV squared. I mean, it was so far off. And they finally, after, 70 years, put a half in front of it. But, man, it's so far off. Just pitiful. All right. So, anyway, so the idea of what happens in collisions, I was thinking about the idea of a spring, and it being just compressed between two objects and what the two objects are saying, what they're doing while the spring is compressed, right? And so to them, it's like you sitting on the earth. They're feeling the pressure, right? So if it's producing 100 pounds of pressure, and we can use pounds because it's the same thing as a joule. Okay, it's the same thing as a watt. It's a certain amount of pressure is being applied to the two objects. And so what are they really doing, or what the Earth is really doing? Well, the Earth really just dents. You know, when you put your weight on it, it's theoretically really is denting. You know, you're actually pushing into it, and you move its molecules, or let's say you move electrons anyway, and you compress them. You force the pressure to equalize. So the pressure going this way has to even the pressure going this way. So they're just, the forces now are, that is the compression force, the fact that you've made this substance uncomfortable. You know, you've pushed things closer than they want to be by a certain amount of pressure, and so that pressure is inside of here now. So now the pressure coming down pushes these things closer to each other, and they're going to be as close to each other to equal the pressure going this way, and so they're going to push back. But the fact is they have to do it from some changed position, so to speak. You definitely have to change the condition. Now we can't see that when it's two steel balls or something, but that's what's really happening. And then so the interesting fact is first you push it, and so there's compression inside the object, but who knows if it really moves the center of gravity, right? Now, maybe, but I can't say at this point. You know, I haven't thought about it enough to say. But anyway, the point I wanted to get to is what happens when you can relieve the pressure. That is, as I release the spring, you know, I release the thing tying them together that's keeping the pressure between them. Well, then this is going to go back to this position. That is, it's going to take mass, all right, mass, electrons, and those are going to go that way. And they're probably going to do it as fast as they can, you know, as fast as the system will allow. So they're going to go very fast, and that's essentially an exhaust. I mean, it's the same thing as a rocket shooting the stuff out. Is the rocket just shooting it from here to here? This is an exhaust. Moving it from here to here is, you know, it's still movement in a direction. It's mass moving in a direction. And it will cause the equal and opposite, so to speak, action, you know, in the sense that you've released mass, you've changed its position, and the rest of the mass has to change position in the sense the opposite direction. And so that's when the Earth actually moves because of you when you get up. You know, when you get off the Earth is when the Earth is moving. You know, when you change the pressure, you release it. So the releasing is where mass is going this way. So that's another way to think about all of these reactions, is they all are inelastic in the sense that they're all deforming something. So, you know, there's a classic example that's just kind of, you know, it's trivial in a way. And they just they do it for the purpose of its, you know, its intuitive, wow, that's weird impact, you know, not for the purpose of good explanation. But, you know, you put a golf ball on top of a tennis ball on top of a basketball, and what'll happen is when you drop this system, all of the energy will end up going into the golf ball, and it'll go, whoa, way the hell up. So it'll take a system that's just got this going down, a mass down, but it'll give all of the velocity to the one object. So big heavy mass, you know, big mass, smaller mass, but all of the mass, you know, will essentially be represented in terms of all of the velocity that was spread over those larger masses will end up being placed into this. So, this loses zero velocity here, and it's all put into this object. And there would be a lot of velocity. For these heavy objects, there's a rather substantial amount of energy. Okay, it's a substantial amount of energy to move the heavy object, you know. But what's really happening is they're all denting, right? I mean, it just depends on who's denting and who's deforming in which way. So we already know that, you know, if you throw a tennis ball at a wall, the tennis ball is what actually deforms, right? I mean, the tennis ball gets flat on one side, it does this compressing thing, and that's where the energy is being stored, is in the tennis ball. The wall isn't feeling much pressure at all, much reduced. So if it was a baseball, this thing would feel, the wall would feel, say 500 pounds of pressure. If it wasn't a compressible tennis ball, let's just say the same weight, but it wasn't compressible. It didn't have air in it. It had foam, a rigid foam. Then the wall would feel the full weight of its momentum. But because it's a tennis ball and the air can compress and move around, and the whole surface is rubbery and can stretch, the ball, instead of the 400 to 500 pounds here, that's only like 200 pounds, and the other 300 pounds goes into deforming the tennis ball. So now the tennis ball has it built into the elastic of the rubber and the compression of the air, and then it bounces off the surface. It makes itself into a spring, and then the spring bounces. So the wall never knows its side of the equation. The momentum never goes into the wall. It just goes into the ball. And so this is happening here. The basketball dents, the the whatever tennis ball dents. The tennis ball dents again here. That's and the basketball dents here. So all the energy is in the elastic of the balls instead, and the ground is feeling a lot less than it would if they were rigid. So the ground isn't really pushing, it's just the energy is just in the whatever you want to call this stuff, or something like that. I have to think. This is a doubtful. I mean, this isn't necessarily. I mean, maybe the full pressure actually goes into the wall, but no. Yeah, I really don't think it does, because then I think the wall would actually get dented if I used a hard surface. So the wall never dents because it never built up enough pressure. So the wall never has the benefit of undenting. So the wall doesn't get the undenting vibration. So that's the piece missing. So it is less pressure. So again, the idea is that all of this can be understood. They give you these more complex terms that do all these, square root of and this times that and all this weird stuff. But what they really have done is create a formula that's basically saying velocity. They put velocity in the equation twice for no good reason. And this half is always suspect, right? But when you take the square root of a 2, you just end up with a 1. That kind of stuff. So it's all kind of suspect whether any of that has any coherency to the reality. And there's every good reason for you to understand that velocity and mass are equal partners, half and half. They are splitting the job of creating any reasonable understanding of what energy or momentum of your movement would be. And that there's just no good reason to think the velocity is twice as, more than, squared of importance compared to a half of the mass. I mean, there's just no good reason to think mass is unimportant and velocity is so much more important. Because, that's, in the real world, it's just not true. So I've given lots of examples. The bowling one is a good one. I mean, I'm just saying this. Their theory predicts that if you take the lighter bowling ball and throw it twice as fast, the half is heavy, and you throw it twice as fast, that somehow you could theoretically have the energy to knock twice as many pins down. That your capacity to bang into things, is somehow more than your momentum. And everybody can kind of know that can't be true, because they're going to know that every time you hit something, you're losing momentum. I can't take the bowling ball, the 8-pound ball, going twice as fast. I can't take it and have any expectation that it isn't going to, as soon as it hits something, if there's just one pin in the alley, that after I hit the pin, the ball is not going, let's say it was 16 miles an hour, you know it's going 14 after that. You know it's lost momentum because this is busy doing stuff with that momentum. You know it had to lose it. It can't keep it. So I mean, you can just figure out that there's no energy for it to do twice as much work. This can't be possible. And this is really important because they really think you can do twice as much work. I mean, they think you can get real work out of work. Anyway, out of this formula that it does real work in the universe, and all of their theories about how much energy an electron has and protons and all of this, the whole way they've invented neutrinos and all of that kind of stuff. All of those formulas are dependent on this being right. If this equation is giving them wrong answers, then all of their answers are wrong. Then there's all kinds of places that could be wrong because they haven't recognized that this doesn't predict accurately. It's not an accurate statement of something's energy. The accurate statement is just this. And Newton knew it, and Descartes knew it. In the 1652, okay? They knew this already. I don't know, Descartes even further back, so I mean, I don't know, They knew this in the 1600s, okay, 1600. They already knew this truth. They'd already discovered it. And physics actually undiscovered it. And did this stupid, weird thing because a few religious kooks didn't like the simplicity of this. This was too obvious. And so they just messed it up with this bullshit. And, well, this bullshit came, this bullshit here didn't come till nearly the 1800s. Right? So you didn't get this bullshit until the 1800s. And you got this bullshit, in like 1650 or whatever. So they added this stupid bullshit in 1650. They didn't put this on it until the 1800s. I mean, and they had this right answer already that never failed. This didn't ever fail. There was no experiment where this failed. Okay, so there was no circumstance where you say, oh, this completely fails. I mean, you could be, you could have a little tiny bit of confusion again about gravity because the light thing goes, much higher in gravity. But like I said, they could figure that part out. That's just the fact of gravity. Gravity is a proportional force. It affects you proportional to your mass. So the lighter you are, the less it affects you. The heavier you are, the more it affects you. But that's not going to be true of a spring. Springs don't care how light you are or how heavy you are. They're just going to measure how much weight you hit them with. How much MV. And then, like I said, two north-facing magnets. They don't care how light you are. They don't care, even your speed. They don't care what it is. They're always going to sit there and give you the same back for the same distance. You bring them close together, they're going to push back the same amount each time. So they knew this. They knew how this works, and they knew how this works back here, 1600s. And I'm having to make a video explaining how there was really no good reason to mess this up. The history's terrible. I mean, I've recited some of it to you, but if you go out and research Leibniz, and Huygens and versus Descartes and Newton, and you'll see it's a terrible history. This wasn't made out of a nice trial, where they took all the evidence, the physicists got together and, sent papers to each other, all pointing out, here's some experiments, here's the results of the experiments, we're going to propose a change, and, it wasn't some good process like that where they actually had to prove the case. It was just made out of a bunch of bandwagon team player kind of stuff. Whose side are you on? It's actually that bad. And it's really rubbish. I mean, and Descartes really got, is quite underappreciated. I mean, they're all religious nuts back then. But again, another religious nut who kept the religion out of his physics. And, he really did a lot of good, Galileo, Descartes, Newton. A pretty, and Newton being born on the same day that Galileo died, and here Descartes is covering the distance in between. And somehow you rejected all of that work, to jump on a silly, weird, bizarre, strange notion of reality. Where you just completely magnified the meaning of something that can't be rationalized. There's no rational reason for you to think velocity is twice as important. I mean, many times more important than mass in determining how something's going to affect you. In determining what something's weight is. And that's really all it is. This isn't a weight formula. MV is a weight formula. It can just tell you how many pounds the damn thing is. I mean, it's just so simple. So anyway, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I mean, it's just dismal here on the internet. There's so few people interested in these subjects. Nobody will make rational arguments. Most of the dissidents are cowards too. They just run away from an argument. They just want to preach, their new version, their version of reality, and they don't want to be interrogated on what bubblegum wrapper they found that silly theory on. But that's the only way this really, this whole reality thing, it doesn't get improved or made better because you run away from having trials. You really have to try theories, ideas. They have to be put on trial. And there has to be some sort of rational jury, fair jury that decides what reason can permit. And what the evidence shows. And if people are all a bunch of dishonest players who are just, promoters for a team, advertising, propagandizing, well, that's really a dismal prospect. But that appears to be all the internet runs on. All right, a little funny side note is that there were comments on, I have another channel in Mendham, and does philosophy, and anyway, somebody made a comment, and I was commenting from my DraftScience channel on my other channel to their comment, and apparently YouTube canceled one of my comments. I mean, the two they have to know they're both my channels. It's just kind of funny that they can. They can just make comments disappear. You don't never know. When you post a comment, you have no idea whether the person's going to see it, that it's really live. I mean, it's ridiculous. That you can't, it seems like it posts. When I viewed the conversation from my DraftScience channel, the comment's right there. But if I view it from anywhere else on Earth, no, my comment, it does not appear. I mean, it's just such bullshit. Ugh. Ugh. So, this is not the world you people should be endorsing or supporting or defending. It's just really disappointing. I mean, I was already disappointed. I had a meager amount of hope for you people. I didn't have much of an expectation. I didn't expect any of you pigs to fly. But you just love quicksand. I mean, you sit there and look for it, and it's just all right. Well, whatever. It just surprises me the depth of the dishonesty and the bullshit you people are made out of. But anyway, so that'll have to do, pigs. All I can do is reason with you morons, but you're not reasonable. So that's what's being proven. Even more proven than the silliness, of the kinetic energy formula, is the fact that, boy, you people suck. Ugh. Creepy. Anyway. till the next time and such. This has been a Draft Science video presentation.